Today, we're going to crack a puzzle from a really ancient text. But look, this isn't just some dusty history lesson. It's a total masterclass in logic. And it all kicks off with a very simple, very human mix-up. So, let's get right into it. You know that feeling, right? Imagine you and a friend have identical suitcases at the airport. You look away for a second, and suddenly, you have no idea which one is yours. It's an easy mistake. But what if the stakes were way, way higher? What if this mix-up happened in a situation with ancient, totally unbendable rules? Well, that's the exact scenario we find in the Talmud. You've got two people, each bringing an identical animal for a sacrifice. The animals get mixed up, and now nobody knows which animal belongs to who. You're probably thinking, okay, but they're identical. What's the big deal? Well, there's this one crucial ritual that complicates everything. And this ritual, it's called samika, and it's the absolute core of our problem. See, it's a deeply personal act. The owner has to place their hands on their own specific animal. If they do it on the wrong one, the whole thing is invalid. So with these animals all mixed up, it feels like we're at a complete dead end. How could either person possibly fulfill their duty? This is where our legal detective story really begins. The ancient scholars, they didn't just throw their hands up and say, oh well. No, they treated this like a case that had to be cracked, and they started digging for a logical breakthrough. So the first scholar to take a crack at this is Rav Yosef. He looks at this situation it seems completely impossible and comes up with what, on the surface, looks like a brilliantly simple way out. Rav Yosef's insight here is just fascinating. He points out that this whole placing of hands ritual, well, it wasn't actually required for offerings brought by women. So he theorizes that the law about how to handle these mixed-up animals must only be talking about them, which makes the whole semika problem just disappear. It's so elegant, so clean. So it seems like Rav Yosef has totally solved it, right? A neat, tidy explanation, case closed. But, in the world of Talmudic debate, a simple answer is almost never the final answer. It has to be tested, it has to be challenged, and it has to hold up against everything else they know. And right on cue, a challenger steps into the ring, a scholar named Abaye. And he's got a piece of evidence, an older teaching that seems to completely blow Rav Yosef's women-only theory out of the water. What Abaye does is he presents this older teaching called a baraita. Think of it like a source from outside the main textbook. And this text talks about what to do when an individual's offering gets jumbled up with the community's offering. And this is the foundation of his whole counter-argument. Okay, so let's walk through Abaye's logic here because it's a really powerful chain of reasoning. He says, hey, look at this text. It's comparing an individual's offering right next to a community's offering. Now, step 2. Community offerings were, by definition, brought by men, and men are obligated in the hand-placing ritual. So, step 3, it only makes sense that the individual's offering being compared to it must also be from a man. And there it is, the final step. This ancient text seems to provide a procedure for mixed-up animals belonging to men, which means Rav Yosef's theory just can't be right. And just like that, boom, the case is blown wide open all over again. Abaye's evidence looks solid, right? It really seems like Rav Yosef's elegant solution is totally dead in the water. The simple answer, well, it wasn't so simple after all. But this is where our master detective, Rava, enters the scene. And instead of trying to argue with Abaye or trying to defend Rav Yosef, Rava does something absolutely brilliant. He decides to put the evidence itself on trial. Rava interrogates Abaye's ancient text with this killer question. You see, the text makes a distinction between animals that were mixed up while they were alive versus after they were slaughtered. But Rava just stops and asks, why? Why should that even matter? He realizes this distinction is kind of illogical, and he sees a flaw, not in the arguments, but in how everybody is reading the evidence. And this right here, this is the pivot point of the entire debate. Rava is suggesting that everyone, including Abaye, has fundamentally misunderstood what that ancient text was even talking about in the first place. He's about to propose a whole new way to read it. This is it. This is the big aha moment. Rava is about to completely reframe the entire conversation, and in doing so, he's going to solve the whole puzzle. So Rava argues that the text isn't literally talking about alive versus slaughtered animals. He says it's a kind of metaphor. The real distinction it's making is about what happens after the slaughter. Was their blood collected in separate cups, like they were still alive and distinct, or was it all just mixed together in a single bowl? And with that one single insight, Rava changes absolutely everything. That piece of evidence that Abba used to take apart Rav Yosef's theory, turns out it was completely irrelevant. It was talking about a totally different scenario, a case of mixed-up blood, not mixed-up living animals. So let's just recap the resolution here. Abaya's big objection? It's dismissed, because it was based on a total misreading of the evidence. The text he quoted had nothing to do with our original problem of two live, mixed-up animals, which means Rav Yosef's original elegant theory that the rule applies to women's offerings is no longer contradicted. The logic holds up. And just like that, Rava cracks the case. He didn't just find an answer. He restored logical consistency to the entire system by showing how crucial it is to read your evidence with absolute precision. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? This whole exercise shows us that for these scholars, the goal wasn't just to get a quick, practical answer. The journey was the destination. It was about stress testing every single idea, questioning every assumption, and making sure every piece of evidence truly fit. It was a workout for the logical mind. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. In our age of information overload, where we are constantly bombarded with evidence and arguments, what can we learn from Rava's method? How often do we really stop and ask if the evidence being presented is even relevant to the argument being made? It's a pretty powerful lesson in critical thinking, all from an ancient legal puzzle.